There are some people you meet in life who feel like riddles wrapped in wool sweaters and old cologne. My father-in-law, Frank Thompson, was one of them. He was a quiet man with storm gray eyes and a voice so calm it could make your worst day feel less sharp. He always spoke in parables, like some old mystic you'd expect to find on a mountaintop, not in the leather recliner by the fireplace, sipping black coffee and watching the news at a volume only dogs could hear. The first time I met him, I was nervous. Luke, my then boyfriend and now husband, was adamant that I'd love him. "He's weird," Luke had said, "but good weird. The kind of weird that grows on you." I had laughed. That's what people say right before introducing you to someone who eats expired yogurt and talks to their plants. "He does both," Luke said deadpan, "but you'll see." Frank greeted me with a nod when I arrived at the family home. No hug, no smile, just a nod and a simple, "Shoes by the door, never in the hallway." I remember blinking, half laughing. "Sure," I said, "no problem." He watched me carefully. You can tell a lot about a person by how they leave their shoes. That was Frank's thing, sayings like that. Things that sounded like nonsense when he said them, but would stay with you for hours. Maybe days. At first I thought it was a generational thing. Or maybe he was just trying to sound wise. You know, the way older people do when they want to leave a mark. But Frank didn't seem to care about impressing anyone. He wasn't the type to boast or lecture. He'd just drop his odd pieces of advice like breadcrumbs and then retreat into silence, as if daring you to find your own way through the woods. Over the years, I collected his sayings like bottle caps. Don't argue near mirrors, the reflection isn't always yours. If the power goes out during dinner, eat quietly, it's not always just the electricity that's gone. Knock twice before you enter your own home. Once for yourself, once for the unknown. They were strange, they made me laugh. But they also made me feel like he saw something the rest of us didn't. Frank lived with us for a while after he had a knee replacement surgery. I thought it would be awkward. We had only seen each other during holidays or brief visits. But having him in our home day in, day out was different, more intimate. And yet it wasn't bad. He kept to himself, spent most mornings reading old paperbacks in the sunroom, always in that same gray cardigan with the elbow patches. He liked jazz, crosswords, and toast with an obscene amount of peanut butter. And every time I tried to do something for him, make his tea, fluff his pillows, bring him snacks, he'd stop me with a hand in the air and say, "Save your energy for the storm, it always comes." I asked Luke once what he meant by that. "He's been like that since I was a kid." Luke said he's not being dramatic. "I think he just sees life as a series of lessons." "Lessons for what?" Luke shrugged. "Survival, maybe even protection." He's always believed in being prepared for the unseen. I didn't press, but I couldn't lie, part of me was curious. Frank wasn't just quirky, he was deliberate. Calculated, like everything he did had layers. He never said goodbye, he always said stay alert. He never turned his back to a dark room. He carried 2 wallets, one with real cards, one with fake ones. And once when Noah, our then 3-year-old son, fell down and started crying, Frank picked him up, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "If you ever get lost, listen for silence, that's where safety hides." I began writing down the things Frank said. I didn't know why. I told myself it was for laughs. That someday I'd compile them into a Grandpa's Guide to Weird Wisdom book for Noah. But the truth was, I liked the way his words lingered. I liked that he made me think. And slowly, I began seeing him not just as Luke's father, but as a mentor, a guardian, someone who, in his own peculiar way, made me feel safe. We grew close in the quiet ways people sometimes do, shared coffee, crossword puzzles, the occasional conversation that revealed just enough to keep you wanting more. I once asked him why he gave so much advice. He didn't answer right away. He just stared out the window for a long time before saying, "Because when I'm gone, my words are all I'll have left to protect the people I love." I remember feeling a chill then, like the air had shifted. But I didn't ask more. I wish I had. The day Frank died was painfully ordinary. It was a Thursday. I had gone grocery shopping while Luke took Noah to soccer practice. Frank had stayed home. He had waved at me from the porch when I left, his cardigan buttoned all the way to the top. Cup of coffee in one hand, a crossword in the other. When I returned, the groceries still in the trunk. I found him slumped in his recliner, eyes closed, arms resting at his sides. At first, I thought he was sleeping. But then I noticed the crossword had fallen to the floor, and his coffee cup had spilled, the mug shattered in pieces at his feet. And there was something awful in the stillness of the room. I screamed, called 911. The rest was a blur of sirens. Paramedics, Luke collapsing to his knees. Noah crying because no one could explain why Grandpa wasn't waking up. They said it was a heart attack. Instant, painless. But nothing about it felt painless to me. Frank had been such a constant, such a watchful presence, that his absence felt like the ground itself had shifted. I kept expecting to see him sitting in the sunroom, nodding at me, muttering some cryptic phrase. But the chair stayed empty, and the silence he left behind was deafening. It was 3 days after the funeral when I found the envelope. It had my name on it. Just mine. Not Luke, not to the family, just Ellie. I found it tucked inside one of his books. On the shelf in the sunroom. I hadn't even meant to look there. I just wanted to be near something of his. The envelope was thick, heavy, like it held more than just paper. My hands shook as I opened it. There was a letter handwritten in Frank's precise, all-caps scrawl, and a small silver key. I stared at both for a long time before I could bring myself to read the words. They started simply, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone." I burst into tears, because it felt so final, so heartbreakingly real. And then the next lines made my breath catch. "I know I've always seemed odd, maybe even paranoid, but I promise you, everything I've ever told you, every piece of advice, every little saying wasn't random. I meant them, I needed you to remember them." I kept reading, and with each word my heart pounded louder. There are things I've seen, things I've kept quiet about to protect this family. But protection doesn't last forever. So I'm trusting you, Ellie, not because you're my daughter-in-law, but because you're the only one who listens. I read the letter 3 times, and then I looked down at the key in my hand. It was cold, old, engraved with the number 42B. I didn't know what it opened, but I knew deep in my bones that it mattered. Frank hadn't left behind advice. He had left behind instructions. And something was coming. Later that evening, when Luke and I were putting Noah to bed, I tried to bring up the letter gently. "I found something," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed while he folded laundry beside me. "Oh," his voice was tired, his shoulders heavy with grief. "A letter from your dad to me." He stopped folding. "Just you." I nodded slowly. He looked surprised, not angry. Just confused. "What did it say?" "A lot," I said. I didn't want to lie. But I didn't know how to tell him everything. Not yet, not until I understood it myself. Luke sat beside me, exhaling hard. "I still can't believe he's gone. One minute he's there with his damn peanut butter toast, and the next." His voice cracked and I instinctively reached for his hand. "He loved you," I said. Luke nodded. "I know, he was just always so weird about it." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Frank's voice replaying in my head. Every piece of advice, every strange phrase. Every moment I had once brushed off now felt like a breadcrumb, and I had to start following them. At 2:17 a.m., I got out of bed. I went to the living room and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years, my old journals. Somewhere in them, I had written down dozens of Frank's sayings. I needed to see them all together. I needed to map them, study them, connect them. The more I read, the more I realized they weren't random at all. They followed themes: safety, secrecy, awareness, warnings disguised as wisdom. I opened my phone and started a list. Shoes by the door always. If the power goes out, eat quietly. Don't argue near mirrors. Knock twice before entering your home. Write down your dreams before 6 a.m. Never trust a man who smiles with his eyes closed. If the teacup breaks, leave the room. The last one gave me chills. It was so specific, so visual. And yet at the time I had laughed when he said it, assuming it was about manners or bad luck. But now I wasn't sure. Now every phrase felt like a trapdoor waiting to be discovered. The next morning I went back to the sunroom and stood in front of the bookshelf, the spot where I had found the letter. Frank had hundreds of books, most of them worn from rereading fiction, non-fiction, war biographies, detective novels, survival manuals. His collection was as layered as he was. I started pulling them off the shelf one by one, checking for notes, hidden items, anything that felt intentional. Nothing, until I got to a small, thin book titled Everyday Survival Tactics. The spine was cracked and the pages were yellowed with age. It wasn't a book I had ever seen him read, and yet something about it felt off. He had written small annotations in the margins, underlining phrases like "always prepare for the known unknown" and no such thing as true accidents. In the back cover was a pocket, like the kind in old library books. Inside it, a small slip of paper. The key fits the bench holds the truth. I froze. We had a wooden bench in our backyard. An old, rustic thing Frank had loved to sit on during spring. He used to feed the birds from there, scribble in his little notebook, and sip coffee from his thermos. I ran outside barefoot. The morning dew soaked my feet as I reached the bench. I hadn't sat on it since before the funeral. I crouched and ran my fingers under the edge, wood, dust, and then metal. A latch. It was nearly invisible beneath the plank, but once I felt it, I knew. I inserted the silver key into the tiny hole and turned. Click. The plank popped loose. Inside the bench, tucked into a shallow compartment, was a metal tin box like a lunchbox from another era. It was cool to the touch, sealed with a twist latch. Inside the tin were 4 things. A flash drive. A photo of a man I didn't recognize. A handwritten list of names, half of which were crossed out. And another note, this one typed. Ellie, you need to be brave now. What's inside this drive is for your eyes first. Decide what to do after you've seen it. But remember, never plug it in on your home network. Go somewhere public, somewhere safe. And if you're reading this after something strange has happened, good. It means you're paying attention. My breath caught in my throat. Frank wasn't just weird, he was hiding something. Something big. And now I was at the center of it. It took me 2 days to gather the courage to plug in the flash drive. 2 days of hiding it in my nightstand. Checking it every few hours like it might disappear if I looked away. 2 days of pretending I was fine when inside. I was anything but. I hadn't told Luke about the bench, or the note, or the drive, not because I didn't trust him, but because I wasn't sure I trusted what I had found, or what it might mean. Frank had written, "Don't plug it in on your home network." That warning kept looping in my mind. Was it paranoia or protection? Either way, I wasn't going to ignore it. So on the 3rd day, I packed up my laptop, kissed Noah on the forehead while he napped, and told Luke I needed to run some errands. He offered to come, but I shook my head, forced a smile. "I just need some space," I said. "I think it'll help." He nodded, visibly grieving still. His father's death had taken something from him I couldn't replace, and maybe that's why I couldn't bring myself to burden him with more just yet. I drove 30 minutes away to a coffee shop near the university, the kind of place where no one asked questions, where people minded their business and Wi-Fi was free. I sat in the farthest corner, ordered a cappuccino, and waited until the seat beside me had remained empty for 10 solid minutes before I pulled the drive from my coat pocket and slid it into my laptop. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then a folder popped open. It was titled simply, "Trust No One." Inside were 3 files. 1, a video labeled "Watch This First." 2, a folder called Marcus Files. 3, a scanned letter, no title. Just a date, 2 weeks before Frank died. My hands trembled as I clicked on the video. The screen went black, then flickered to life. Frank appeared sitting in our sunroom. Cardigan buttoned, eyes clear and steady. The room behind him was bright. Early morning light filtering through the windows. He was holding a coffee mug. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I'm gone and something has happened or is about to happen that you need to be ready for." He paused, sipped his coffee, set it down. "I didn't want to involve you. I wanted to believe that I was just being an old man. Paranoid stuck in my head, but things I've seen, things I've heard, they've convinced me that staying silent could cost us everything. Especially you and Luke and Noah." He leaned in closer. "I've kept records, I've followed patterns. For months, I've been watching someone I trusted turn into someone I don't recognize. I didn't know how deep it went, but I've learned enough to know you need to be prepared." He looked tired then, like he had aged years in just a few minutes. "The files in this drive, they're about Marcus." I froze. Yes, that Marcus, Luke's brother. My son, I hate saying it out loud, but I have reason to believe he's been stealing. Not just from the business, but from me. And worse, I think he's planning something. Frank glanced away from the camera, then back. "I don't know if he's working alone. I don't know how far it's gone. But I've seen documents disappear from my office. I've found bank accounts I didn't open. And I've overheard enough conversations to know this isn't just sibling rivalry or bad accounting." He looked directly into the camera. "Ellie, I'm trusting you because you see things. You listen and you don't dismiss what feels off. That makes you dangerous and valuable. The screen flickered again. Please read the letter, look at the files. Then decide what to do, but whatever happens, trust your instincts and don't confront anyone until you're absolutely sure who you're talking to. The video ended. I sat there frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Marcus, no, it couldn't be. He was obnoxious sometimes, arrogant. Entitled but dangerous, a thief. I opened the letter. It was dated 2 weeks before Frank's heart attack. I saw him again tonight, in the office. He didn't know I was there. I watched him use my computer. I saw him enter a password that only I should know. He's been printing documents, financials, client accounts, even personal statements. I confronted him weeks ago, casually, but he brushed me off. Said I was confused, that I was getting old, but I know what I saw. If he finds out what I've stored, he might come looking. That's why I moved it. That's why I'm writing this, because if something happens to me, if I disappear or die suddenly, don't believe it was natural, not without proof. I covered my mouth with both hands, reading the line again and again. If I die suddenly, don't believe it was natural. No, 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 no. I clicked on the folder labeled Marcus Files. Inside were PDFs, dozens of them. Bank transfers, forged signatures. A shell company registered in someone else's name, traced back to a PO box in Marcus's city. There were also screenshots of text messages, encrypted ones. But Frank had decrypted some. Names I didn't recognize, vague threats, transactions. The pieces were horrifyingly clear. Marcus had been stealing from the family business. And Frank had known. And now Frank was dead. That night I couldn't sit still. I paced the kitchen like something caged. My hands itched to print everything, to highlight, to scream, but instead, I just stood there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. Marcus had been at the funeral. He had held Noah. He had cried. But now all I could think about was what Frank wrote, "Don't believe it was natural." The words clung to me like a second skin. I opened a drawer and pulled out a new spiral-bound notebook. I began scribbling, cross-referencing dates, recording patterns. It was 1:47 a.m. when I finally stopped, exhausted, hollowed, afraid. Not for me, but for Luke, for Noah, for the life we had built that now felt like it was balanced on broken glass. I still hadn't told Luke. I needed more time. I needed to be sure. Because if what Frank feared was true, if Marcus was involved in his death, then this wasn't just a theft. It was a betrayal. And it might not be over yet. After that night, I stopped sleeping deeply. Even when I closed my eyes, my brain would buzz, half listening for creaks in the floorboards, keys in the front door, or the ghost of Frank's voice whispering some forgotten warning in the back of my mind. I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was afraid of what might already be in the light. Marcus. He'd called Luke 2 days after the funeral. I had been sitting at the table, nursing a lukewarm mug of tea when the call came in on speaker. Luke was upstairs, so I heard the message. "Hey man, just checking in. You okay? I've been thinking about Dad. About all the crap I said before. I hope you know I loved him. Anyway, let me know if you need anything." There was a pause and then, "Oh, and hey, when's a good time to talk about the business stuff? I think we need to go over some accounts soon." My skin prickled. He didn't even wait a week. I decided to visit Frank's study one last time. Luke had been reluctant to go through his dad's things. Grief had made him retreat inward. And I didn't push, but that morning, while he took Noah to the park, I walked into the study alone. The door still creaked the same way. The air smelled of dust, worn paper, and stale black coffee. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by shelves packed with memories, survival books, old pens, folders, and that familiar sense of watchfulness Frank always carried with him. The desk drawer had a false bottom, one I had noticed months ago when Frank accidentally knocked it loose while looking for stamps. I remembered how quickly he shoved it back in, muttering something about keeping chaos organized. I opened the drawer, pulled gently on the back edge until the thin wooden panel gave way. There, tucked inside, was a slim brown leather journal, one I had never seen before. I flipped to the first page. March 7th, Marcus accessed the main account again. I changed the passwords yesterday. He must have overridden them, using software. March 15th, he left his phone unlocked on the table. I saw encrypted messages from a name I didn't recognize, Keller. They mentioned an accounting extraction. Sounds like laundering. March 22nd, he asked if I'd updated the will. Strange, never cared before. April 2nd, if anything happens to me, don't believe it was natural. If I'm gone, check the flash drive, tell Ellie only her. I stopped reading. The journal was confirmation of everything in the files and more. Frank hadn't just suspected Marcus. He had been documenting him, following his moves, quietly gathering evidence for months. I sat down in his chair, the weight of the notebook in my lap, and realized he had trusted me to finish what he started. Not Luke, not a lawyer, not the police. May. Because I was the one who always listened. It happened the next evening. Luke had invited Marcus over for dinner. I didn't know until an hour before. I wanted to say no, I wanted to scream. But instead, I cooked. I smiled. I let him sit across from me and talk about how we should go over the business structure again, and how Dad would have wanted a clean slate. I nodded. I served roasted chicken. I drank wine slowly, even though my hand shook the entire time. Noah sat between Luke and me, humming to himself while building a tiny Lego tower. I watched Marcus closely, his eyes, his tone, the way he glanced at his phone like he was waiting for something. Everything about him made my skin crawl. Then it happened. We were clearing plates when I dropped the teacup. It was an old ceramic one Frank used, green with a cracked handle. I had picked it on purpose. It fell from the counter and shattered at Marcus's feet. He froze for just a second, then smiled. Careful, Ellie, bad omen, isn't it? I stared at the shattered pieces. My mind echoed, if the teacup breaks, leave the room. My breath caught. I set the plate down and muttered, I'll grab the broom. But I didn't. I stepped out into the hallway, turned the corner and waited. I held my phone in one hand, thumb hovering over the voice memo but. Then I heard it. Marcus's voice, low and sharp. We can't wait much longer. Luke, I've been covering for you. You know what Dad kept? If that drive resurfaces, it all unravels. My heart nearly stopped. Luke's voice quieter. I don't know where it is, I told you. Find it, Marcus hissed, or I will. And if Ellie gets in the way. The sentence trailed off. I pressed record. If Ellie gets in the way, what? Luke asked, his voice trembling. Marcus said nothing for a beat. Then she can't be trusted. I think she suspects something, Luke added. My throat closed. I know she does, Marcus replied coldly. She always had eyes like Dad, too curious for her own good. I backed away, slowly, carefully, and then I ran to the bedroom, locked the door, and finally I let myself cry. Not just because Marcus was the villain Frank had feared, but because Luke, my husband, was somehow involved, or at the very least knew more than he should. The next morning I was calm. Too calm. I made breakfast, packed Noah's lunch, kissed Luke goodbye. Then I called an old friend, a lawyer I trusted. I need to talk, I said, and I need you to help me do something quietly. That afternoon, I printed everything. The files from the drive, the journal pages, the voice recording. I made a copy for the lawyer, another for me, and a third that I kept hidden just in case. By nightfall, I had a plan, and only one person to confront. Not Marcus. Luke. He looked pale when I asked him to sit down. I handed him the voice recorder. Pressed play. When it ended, he didn't look up. I didn't know it went that far. He said quietly, I swear, Ellie. I knew he was hiding money. I knew he'd been using Dad's passwords. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to blow up the family. I thought it would stop. You didn't tell me. I was afraid. I stared at him, and for a second I saw the boy I had fallen in love with. The man who built forts with our son. The man who had grieved his father with real, soul-deep pain. I don't know what to do, he whispered. I do, I said. Because Frank had shown me. And it was time to finish what he started. The next morning came too quietly. The sky was gray, clouded with a dull stillness that made the air feel heavier than it should have. I stood in the kitchen staring at the back window. Frank's bench barely visible through the misty glass. It still looked the same. Ordinary. But I knew better now. I knew that what looked ordinary often held the extraordinary just beneath the surface. That was Frank's gift, seeing what others didn't. And now it had become mine. By noon, I was sitting in a sterile office across from Lisa Mendez, my old college roommate turned criminal defense attorney. I hadn't seen her in years, but when I emailed her with the subject line, urgent, confidential, life-altering, she responded in less than 10 minutes. She was as sharp as I remembered. Still wore her hair in a low braid. still tapped her pen when she was deep in thought. So, she said after reading through the file, you're telling me your brother-in-law has been embezzling money from the family business, possibly laundering it, and your husband might have helped cover it up. Yes. And you have this, she tapped the folder of documents, because your dead father-in-law left you a flash drive in a backyard bench and wrote warnings about his own death. Yes, I repeated, heart pounding. Lisa sat back slowly. Jesus, Ellie. I know. She leaned forward. You did the right thing coming to me. But if we move forward, this becomes very real. There's enough here to warrant an investigation, and once I submit it, I can't take it back. I'm ready. Is your husband? I hesitated. I don't know. That night, I told Luke I was meeting with Lisa again. He didn't ask questions, but I could see the worry in his eyes, like he sensed something was about to collapse. And he was right. The next morning, Marcus was arrested. It happened quietly, no sirens. No shouting, just 2 plainclothes officers who showed up at his office and escorted him out. I watched the footage online. He didn't resist, didn't even look surprised. He knew. He had always known this day would come. He just never expected the one to bring him down would be me. Luke called me an hour later, his voice shook. They took him. I know. There was a long pause. I should have said something earlier. You still can, I said, to the police, to our son, to me. He was silent for a while before he whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't say it back. Because forgiveness would take time. But truth, that had finally arrived. Frank had one more gift for us. A week after Marcus's arrest, I received a call from his attorney. Frank had left a safety deposit box in my name. Not Luke's. Mine. I drove downtown with a racing heart. The key he had left me in my hand. Still cool and smooth like the first day I found it. Inside the box were 3 items. 1, a manila envelope labeled Ellie. 2, a legal deed. 3, and a photograph. I opened the envelope first. It was a letter. Ellie, if you're reading this, it means you were brave. You followed the signs, and for that I thank you. This house, the one you live in with my son and grandson, it's yours. Not just figuratively, I put the deed in your name months ago. Luke doesn't know I did it to protect you and Noah. If anything ever went wrong, I wanted you to have something no one could take from you. I've seen what greed does to families. I've seen what secrets can destroy. But I've also seen what courage can build. You were the only one who ever listened. So now I'm asking you to do one more thing. Don't let Noah grow up afraid of shadows. Teach him to walk toward them with a flashlight in his hand. And when he asks why you always knock twice before coming home, tell him it's because some lessons are worth keeping. With love, Frank. I couldn't hold back the tears. Not this time. The deed was real, clean, final. Frank had transferred ownership of the house 6 months before his death. Not as a gift, but as a safeguard. A protective measure from a man who saw storms long before the clouds ever rolled in. The photograph in the box was old. Black and white. It was of Frank, young, maybe in his 30s. Standing with a man in military gear. Behind them, a chain-link fence and what looked like a base of some kind. The man next to him had the name Keller written on his uniform. My blood ran cold. The name from the flash drive. Was it a coincidence? Or was this deeper than I had ever imagined? Frank had a past. One I never got to ask about. And maybe that was the final lesson, sometimes. Even the people who protect you the most carry their own ghosts. Weeks passed. Luke began therapy, we talked more. He helped with Noah's school projects. Made pancakes every Sunday. I saw glimpses of the man I married, the one Frank had once quietly said would figure things out eventually. Marcus pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including wire fraud and embezzlement. He never contested the evidence. Never mentioned the flash drive. I think he knew better. The business was dissolved, audited, restructured. Luke walked away from it. And for that, I was grateful. Sometimes letting go is braver than holding on. One evening, I sat with Noah on the porch. He was playing with his toy truck, mumbling something about superheroes and space aliens. Then he looked up at me and asked, "Why do you always knock twice before we come inside?" I smiled, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Well," I said, "your grandpa used to say it was polite. That the house should know we're coming." Noah laughed. "That's silly." "Maybe," I said, "but it made him feel safe. And now it makes me feel safe too." He nodded like that made perfect sense and went back to his toy. I looked toward Frank's bench, still standing strong. And I whispered softly to the air. I listened, Frank, I'm still listening. Because some voices echo far beyond death. And some advice. It saves your life. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe to Renaz Tales for more interesting stories.